All right, more great guests today. Amanda Head is on location at the White House. She is the White House correspondent for Just the News, also the host of Furthermore with Amanda Head podcast. Weekdays at 6 p.m. on Real America's Voice Network, justthenews.com, furthermorepod.com. And then we will be joined by Viva Frei and his audience. We will simulcast with his show to talk a little bit about the 51st state of Alberta, Canada, or Alberta, the 51st state, I guess we would call it. And we will be visited later in the show by Peter Downing, who is actually the founder of the movement called Wexit America Fund, which is about, he is a former policeman, and he is a high-profile leader of the Alberta 51st state movement. Yes, that exists. I know California may secede to Canada, but we may get a piece of Canada in return. We're getting the better deal. We'll be back with Amanda Head right after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
When we first partnered with Active Skin Repair, little did I know that our granddaughter Eloise's parents were already using the brand product on her tender skin. That is the hydrogel spray, which comes in 3 strengths: baby, kids, and adults. It harnesses the power of the body's own immune system to heal rashes, cuts, scrapes, bug bites, even eczema and dermatitis. Here's the company founder and CEO, Justin Gardner.
The technology was just kind of really mind-blowing to me on how simple, but how effective it was.
The key ingredient is hypochlorous acid, a clinically proven antimicrobial molecule already used in hospitals.
What's really cool about it is, again, no toxicity. So you're not using any harsh antiseptics. It's non-cytotoxic. So when you're putting it on, you're killing the bacteria, but you're not hurting any of those healthy cells that your body's producing to actually help heal itself.
I have been using Active Skin Repair's hyaluronic serum on my face, and the results have been great. It's one of the only products I can use. Try them both by picking up the bundle for 20% off at drdrew.com/skin repair. That again is drdrew.com/skin repair. So before I bring our guests in, I want to shine a little light on the hydrating skin serum. It is the only moisturizing agent I can use, literally. Susan had to persuade me to try it, and it worked great. I tried to bring a small amount in like one of those airplane containers for Europe, and I had some skin challenges because of all the sun exposure and wind exposure, and I couldn't find the damn thing, and I was hell to live with because of it. So when I got home, I grabbed my Active Skin Repair face and body hydrating serum. Well,
I
thank
ordered
you.
more. I ran out.
How did I lose that? That's what I understand. I know the container. I can see like it's still sitting in front of me, but I had to tear our whole. Ridiculous. Anyway, so that was me.
Oops, he couldn't live without it.
I couldn't. It was really troubling. All right, let's go right to my first guest, Amanda Head, on location in the White House, correspondent for Just the News, future Furthermore with Amanda Head podcast. Amanda, I first of all, thank you for making an effort to give us a great shot from outside the White House, which would essentially be the same shot. I shouldn't actually say anything because all the press tents give you that shot that you're giving us here anyway, but we didn't want you to get electrocuted out in the thunderstorms.
I know, and I appreciate that. Listen, if we're going to be talking about the MAHA movement, when you're talking about MAHA, I know it's not one of the stipulations of it, but I'm pretty sure a requirement of being healthy ever or again is not getting burnt to a crisp by lightning. So.
Yeah, I would agree. A lightning strike is not part of the MAHA plan. So I watched the press conference. I read the materials. I was impressed. Everybody seemed very upbeat. President Trump said he would take Jay Bhattacharya, Marty Makary, and Dr. Oz and fire all of them if they didn't operationalize this effort to get drug prices down. What did you hear in the room there?
Yeah, there were a lot of starkly revelatory items that President Trump talked about, and I'll give you some of those statistics in a moment. But Dr. Drew, what was interesting to me as I was hearing you tell your story about what you went through with prostate cancer and what you're currently going through, I was thinking to myself, at a time when our medical and our health and our pharmaceutical industry is so distrusted right now, then they want to heap this on, creating even more skepticism around, did he know, didn't he know, did they test for PSA, did they not, who didn't examine him, who did examine him? It's horrible. That's right. But President Trump spoke about some of these statistics, and these are, it's hard. I get it that it is very hard for parents to listen to these statistics because there is a parental impetus to protect your children. But the conversation around vaccines and a lot of the issues from vaccines cannot be emphasized enough. So here are some items. More than 40% of American children have at least one chronic health condition. Since the 1970s, rates for childhood cancer have increased 50%. In the 1960s, less than 5% of children were obese. Now it is over 20%. So they are talking about the pesticides on our crops. They're talking about the nutrition in our foods and all of these things, the overprescribing of certain drugs for children. And the emphasis obviously is going to be on the younger population, because if you have unhealthy children, those unhealthy children grow up to be unhealthy adults. So if you can target people in the formative years, then that is a huge breakthrough in the health establishment. And isn't it amazing that for so long there has been this perception that on the left side of the aisle, they were the ones that were so health conscious, going vegan and caring about all the things that were in their foods, and yet they weren't the ones who made this happen. And drug costs. They weren't the ones to make this happen. It was Donald Trump in concert with Jay Bhattacharya and RFK Jr. and all of these folks who are helping lead this movement. I just think it's amazing to see. And I talk to people all the time who consider themselves to be, kind of hippie on this side of things. And they used to be Democrats, and they said, I haven't changed, but the party certainly have.
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I'm the same way. I thought I was a liberal. Now I wonder what I am. I'm an orphan. But the thing that surprised me as it pertained to drug prices was I didn't realize how other countries were taking advantage of in terms of making us subsidize their drug prices and get them better prices than us, and that we back the R&D for the drug companies that allowed for the development of these drugs in the first place. This is all serious stuff. And it really reminds me of the whole tariff situation. And that's what Trump said. He said, we need to equalize things again. And if they don't want to, well, then we're not going to take their French wines, and we're not going to take their Italian cars. And that's just the way it's going to go. I thought pretty interesting.
I'll miss the Italian cars and I will miss the French wine, but not if it means that I get really cheap prices for pharmaceuticals for my fellow Americans. Right. I actually knew this was happening from personal experience because I used to suffer from debilitating migraines, and migraine drugs are some of the most expensive ones on the market when they first get released. And I have a sister-in-law who, my family's actually, I married into a Canadian family. My sister-in-law on the northern side of the border was paying just, I think, a $35 copay for her drug. I was paying, I think the ultimate price was about $615 because it was a brand new drug. Unfortunately, I knew this, but this is kind of the theme, Drew, that the American people foot the bill and they end up getting screwed in the process. And if you find everyday Americans and you take the narrative out of it, you take the Democrat messaging, whether you're talking about the tariffs or the pharmaceutical drugs, if you just present it to them and say, hey, with respect to both of these items, the American people were getting screwed. We should only, this should be reciprocal across the board. And especially with pharmaceuticals, we're developing that here. We are placing the risk at the feet of the people who are developing them, the people who are researching them. So we should get the better end of the deal. At least make it equal, but make it even better for Americans. And that's what Trump seems to be trying to do in all of it. Yeah.
Marty McCarry framed, President Trump went around the room and got comments from the various participants. And Marty McCarry said something very interesting. And I liked the way he framed it. He said, look, he said, when it comes to CAR T-cell and checkpoint inhibitors and these wonderful surgeries, nobody does it better than us. That does not take away from the fact that we are amongst the sickest people in the world, and we need to figure out why that is so doctors aren't playing whack-a-mole with chronic illness. Now, one thing that did not come up, psychotropic medications came up, but the mental health condition of this country did not specifically come up. And my prediction is they're looking for root causes. That's going to be one of the root causes. There's going to be a really serious problem with our families, our spiritual health, our meaning making, and our mental health generally.
Yeah, and look, I mean, like we said, this movement is somewhat focused on children because you want to raise up a healthy young generation. And true, you hit the nail on the head. When you look at all of the drugs that kids are prescribed these days, we are over-prescribing for things like ADHD to an extreme and damaging degree. And there are dozens of studies out there that show that can change your brain chemistry. So you put a child on this and you put them on it at, let's say, kindergarten, so age 5, and you have it on them, even if you take them off of that drug in middle school, that's still years of being on this drug. And there's just not enough research behind so much of what is new in those drugs, in the vaccine schedule, to know what the implications are 20 and 30 years down the road. And I don't think there's any irony in the fact that you have these people who are sicker. You've got the mental health issues, the chronic diseases, like you just mentioned. Americans are unhealthy. But I will say, I feel like that's kind of part of why our medical system, our surgical system is so good, is because, unfortunately, they've had to deal with this.
Yeah, and we as physicians, we're too busy taking care of pathology to be health experts. It's just the way it is. Sure. We're just so busy dealing with illness. We get a judgment around health based on our experience taking care of illness, but we're too busy dealing with the illness right now. The other thing as it pertains to some of the psychotropic medicines which you raised there, ADHD, one of the conversations that people are not having yet is, guess what one of the primary manifestations of severe childhood trauma is? Childhood ADHD. And yet we completely skate over that and deal with the surface symptoms of the hyperactivity. It's because of the trauma. The trauma needs the treatment, and we just don't deal with that. We don't even identify that. Then the other thing is, all these medications, well, not all, but the vast majority don't have much research on them beyond 6 weeks. That's the way most psychiatric, maybe 6 months at the most, but 6 weeks sort of the average for psychotropic medication. It's really kind of astonishing when you think about how long people stay on these medications.
Absolutely. And Drew, that brings into the conversation drugs like Accutane. I mean, that was a new drug that hit the market in the early 90s. Practically every teenage in America, if they had a pimple, they were prescribed with Accutane. And now we know, and it took years to find out, that can actually lead to higher cases of depression. So it's not even necessarily the psychotropic drugs. And Drew, it's like when we were growing up and they were singing the song to us, the neck bone's connected to the backbone, the shoulder bone, and all of that. They're not making the connection between all of these things. And like you said, you've got medical doctors who are treating one issue. They're not trying to heal the issue, and they're probably not talking to people on the other person's team. So there's not really an effort in concert to make the person healthier and to heal the root causes of the issue. They're just slapping a Band-Aid.
Yeah,
exactly. No,
we just don't have time for it. We just don't. I'll tell you what, the root cause of all this stuff is really where we need to spend our time, and we have not been. There's something else you triggered in my thinking about the medicines and the heel bone connected to the ankle bone. I can't remember now what I was going to say. Shoot, it always comes to me about 2 minutes later. Accutane. Oh, there you go. So what I was going to say was, you could even go more towards the root cause as it pertains to all medication, is that we expect medication to solve our problems. Medications, 100% of medications are dangerous. Yes. Vaccines are dangerous. Medications are dangerous. You take them only when the risk is outweighed significantly by the reward. We have to do no harm. Adding risk with medication is usually all we are doing. And at the same time, back to our mental health, we are ignoring the fact that life is hard, and leaning into some of those challenges is how we develop resiliency and competency. And ordinary misery is a good thing. Imagine that. Not safe spaces, but ordinary misery.
Honestly, you just put yourself in situations where you're not 100% comfortable, then even that builds robustness. We're in an age where if it's cold in your house, you turn on the heater. If it's hot in your house, you turn on the AC. Discomfort does not actually mean that something is damaging you. I was on a kick for a while where I was taking cold showers every morning. And I always thought to myself, it's uncomfortable, but it's not hurting me. And I think that we have moved into a place where we are so comfortable. We look for all of the conditions to be perfect, when in fact, you look at our ancestors, they didn't have any environment that was perfect. And we've moved into the place where we over-medicate everything. And, even back to the Accutane thing, rather than treating it with that, focus on, maybe there's a dairy issue, maybe there's other type of, maybe there's a hormonal issue, and focusing on those types of things, because your body's not going to produce problems for no reason. There's obviously a reason behind that. And I think that that's gotten lost in medical treatment these days.
I want to welcome to the show Viva Frei and his friends, his viewers rather, who are also his friends, and they are our friends. We are live on his channel right now, as well as our own platforms. Is Viva available to come in so I can introduce him to Amanda? We'll see how this all works.
Yeah,
Amanda.
I'm bringing him in now. Okay.
Okay, sit tight. So what is the, hey, one quick thing before I get Viva in here. How was the fallout from the South African thing yesterday?
The fallout from journalists or the fallout from everyday people?
Just the general reaction, because it was such an extraordinary thing to watch, and I didn't know quite what to make of it at the time, and I'm still trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and it's just an extraordinary thing. But what's the fallout sort of been around Washington?
I will tell you this from everyday Americans, including one person in particular, a friend of mine who is from South Africa. He is exceedingly grateful that someone is finally speaking out about this and confronting the leader of South Africa about this. I think that South Africa's president came expecting to get the normal presidential treatment, which is, we're not going to talk about that. We don't want to make for bad or contentious TV. And obviously that is not what you get with President Trump. The Oval Office these days is like the principal's office for global leaders. And you can come there and it can go one of two ways. It can go the way of Bibi Netanyahu and Javier Milei, or it can go in the direction of Zelensky. And I think he expected it to go one way, and maybe it went a little differently.
It really, and of course, when Trump creates these scenes in the, I guess he's in the Roosevelt Room or Hi Viva, right outside the Oval Office, he always goes, well, it makes good TV. I always think to myself, yeah, he knows television.
Yeah.
Viva, I want to introduce you to Amanda Head. She is a correspondent at the White House with Just the News. You can follow Amanda on X, Amanda Head. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. But Drew, just so you know, you're on my channel now, and it was. I thought we're on like 3 or 4 platforms now. So everybody who's watching on my channel, welcome to Dr. Drew. But this is fantastic. And I said the same thing. I said we're going to bring Viva in and his friends. I mean his viewers, and they are now our friends. But the one thing, Amanda, I'll tell you about Viva's sort of setup there is you just drop in. He goes, come join me on my thread at 2:00. I did, and all of a sudden I was on with you. There's no like great waiting room or anything. It's just you're just there.
I'm sorry, guys, I didn't bring a crew. It's just little old me. But next time I will plan on doing some type of simulcast.
Well, it's all good. And listen, I'm going to let Amanda go. Unless you want to stay and talk to Viva. If you have any questions for him, you're welcome to stay with us.
I do. And then I have my own show at 6:00. But Viva, I married into a Canadian family. They are a mixed family when it comes to any type of 51st state situation, whether it is just one province or all of them. What do you hear from your Canadian friends?
I actually hear that a lot of people in Canada were rightly offended by the joke, the quip.
Sure.
The problem is they were offended because they are among the most propagandized people on earth. And when you have media telling you how offensive it is day in and day out, and that it's a serious assault on national sovereignty, people are impressionable. But I was actually surprised by how many people were rightly offended by it, how many people didn't understand the reason for which Trump was doing it, and how many people just don't understand that Canada has legit become a national security threat for America, such that, they say Canada's not for sale. Purchase was not the only option in terms of, remedying national security threats.
Right.
They don't appreciate what Canada has become by way of national security threat to America.
Yeah, I was talking to Peter before we came there. I was telling him I married into a Canadian family. And one of the things that they said was the biggest issue is that Canadians by nature are so polite. So when it comes to any type of hard conversations about what's going wrong in Canada, if there is a hard conversation to be had about, what is the trade imbalance between our two countries? What does the U.S. provide to us that we should be doing for ourselves? But they're so darn polite. So that I think so many of them took issue with President Trump's directness in that. And here we are.
Not to correct you, I'll phrase it differently. Canadians are subservient, and there's a difference between subservience and politeness. And subservient is polite until such time as the other people are not equally as subservient. Then they stop being polite. And there's nothing polite about calling the cops on your neighbors because they're not
absolutely
in the park. So it is. People say Canadians are polite, but it's a historical genetic difference in the country that America fought the British for their independence, their God-given rights, and the Canadians are subjects to a king or a queen who says what their rights are, and they're very deferential to authority, and therefore very angry at the people who are not equally deferential to that authority.
Yeah,
but Amanda,
I tease my husband because we have that American. Go ahead.
I spent a bit of time up there and lately, and they are very nice. But God help you if you scratch the surface. You scratch underneath and seething rage comes out, especially over in British Columbia. It's really quite striking. Not the Albertans. We're going to talk about the Albertans.
No.
Oh, look. What I found the most inciting to the British Columbians, and this is my observation, you were lovely. I had a great time there. But when it comes to what's mine and what's yours, oh my God, sharing is not really a thing. It's not really a concept in British Columbia. It really was striking. Viva, am I on to anything there?
Well, I mean, it's the old communist joke, like what's mine is mine. Mine is yours, and what's yours is mine, and what's mine is mine. It's the old joke. Right. Children do it. No,
yes.
British Columbia is sort of the epicenter of woke, and like Vancouver and Vancouver Island even more so. I was out in Newfoundland.
Victoria,
yeah. But like you go out to Newfoundland, nicest people I've ever met in my entire life, where they invited me in and gave me, pickled rabbit, literally, and just wonderful people. There's wonderful people everywhere in every country across the globe, and there's also
of course,
very intolerant people. Like in America, I sort of analogize the liberals in Canada to the Democrats in America. Very tolerant, very smiley, until you say something like, boys have penises and girls have and then they snap like the triggered meme.
I have to tell you guys, at Winnipeg's Richardson Airport, my husband and I flew there to be with his family. We trade off on Christmases. And it was the first time we had seen this. He was in the men's bathroom and found a box of tampons at Richardson Airport. And he took a video and showed it to me afterwards. And I was so proud of him. He took the little basket and he just dumped it in the trash. And that was the first time I saw it in Winnipeg. And I thought, my gosh, this place is doomed. And this was 2 or 3 years ago.
What's interesting talking about these different country things is I listened to a lot of French radio, and I was listening to a guy interviewed this morning. He was Russian. And he said, people think Russia is still under some sort of Soviet system. We are entrepreneurial. We have freedom. You're thinking of Russians as Putin. Putin has just been a strongman that stabilized our country. You feel what you will about him. Russia is now one of the most liberal, free places you can be. And he was just going after example after example. And I thought, oh my God. And he said, not only that, he goes, no one in Russia thinks about the war. And he said he had a friend whose brother-in-law died in the war. And his position was, he enlisted. He wanted to go to war. So what are you going to do? It's the people die. Wow. That's it. Yeah. That's their level of involvement with the war, with Ukraine. There
is a Ruski toughness and mentality that is apparent in that story.
The amazing thing, Drew, like I met a lot of Russians in Canada who are not as amenable or not as easily manipulated by state media, state propaganda, because they grew up in...
Correct. They're inoculated. They've been inoculated by the Soviet system. They don't fall for it. We fall for it. I heard a great term yesterday. The EU SSR. The EU SSR is more authoritarian and centralized and Soviet-like than the Russian citizens are subjected to right now.
Yeah.
It is, we're calling it, I call it, not even jokingly, the European Soviet Union, but it is wild where, Trump and Vance are right to some extent, where they say Europe and to some extent Canada does not share the core values of America, of a free country anymore. It's like, why have, don't sever ties entirely, but if you don't culturally respect the same things where you're locking people up for social media posts like they're doing in the UK, fining people for misgendering employees like they're doing in Canada, at some point you're going to say this relationship is no longer worth pursuing unless one of us changes, and America should not go down that road. So no, it is amazing that the people who come from oppressive regimes are more easily able to identify the tactics of a government that wants to control you at all costs. The people in Europe, in Canada, are more amenable to still think the government's there to protect you because they listen to Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I go, I will say I've always had this perception of Canada, even since I married into a Canadian family, that, everybody has that friend who has that long-standing relationship back and forth, and they intentionally leave something at their house so that there's still a piece of that relationship they can go back to. That's what Canada feels like to me, because I know you have your own constitution, but you still have the Royal Bank, you still have royal ballets. There's still this abusive relationship past with the crown that there hasn't been a clean, hard divorce.
So, we're not streaming them anymore. Now you're just sitting as by yourself on the stream, not talking.
No, I see her. We got her. We've got you, Amanda. We have you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we see you. We got you. But I heard what you said, and I'll let you go. It seems like the technical people are jumping in there. And
God has spoken.
God bless the Queen and the Commonwealth of the United Kingdom, what's left of it. So, Amanda, we'll look for you. Look for you on X, justthenews.com, X at Amanda Head, and of course, Just the News, and also Furthermore with Amanda Head. Thank you for being here, Amanda. We'll talk soon.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.
You bet. And so, Vivo, we interrupted your show. What were you talking about when we jumped in on you?
I was segueing.
Thank you, guys.
What I thought we were going to talk about here, which was medical assistance in dying in Canada.
Yes, that's next. That's what we're getting into now. So you've been outraged by that and been very sort of outspoken about the excesses of that. And I'm aware of people who have been, I've interviewed some of the Canadians who have been encouraged to consider medically assisted suicide because they had disabilities or they had pain or they had depression. And this one case, I can't remember her name, Susan, she had like a transverse myelitis from, guess what, a vaccine reaction. And she early was being encouraged to consider suicide, early, as opposed to just giving her some assistance in living.
With a 12-year-old son.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah, Drew, that was Kayla Pollock, who got rendered a quadriplegic from the Moderna booster after having had two Pfizer shots. There was another case. I don't know if you saw the ad for Simons. Simons is a retail clothing chain in Canada who decided to dabble their toes into euthanasia, medical assistance in dying, and they did this whole this 2.5 minute montage, and they called it like All Is Beauty or something, about a woman who chose to end her life. She was like 30 some odd, a young woman, because she wanted to die with dignity. And then it came out that the woman had posted Facebook posts to the effect that she didn't want to die, but that she couldn't get care in life, so she just opted for death care. When I first discovered it, was my brother like 2.5 years ago who put up a post on Twitter that said something like, I think it was 13,000 people were euthanized in Canada in that year. And it's like, that's impossible. And then I started looking into it, and it's been like going up 30-40% year after year since the Supreme Court authorized or declared constitutional medical assistance in dying in 2016. And then they legislated that they were going to allow for the mentally ill to take their own lives, because you don't want to discriminate against the mentally ill and you want to allow them to contract into death. So they amended that, but then sunsetted that provision for a few years, and then they extended that sunsetting the provision. But now we've entered a realm in Canada where euthanasia accounts for 4-point-some-odd% of all death in the country. It's like the top 5 leading causes of death. They want to expand it to mature minors, or there's discussion about expanding it to mature minors for whatever that means. The mentally ill. They did a poll that something like 2/3 of Canadians approve of euthanasia for the homeless. And it's like it's an absolute death cult. And then you get state-run media, which Canadians don't yet identify as propaganda, saying euthanasia is actually going to save healthcare costs. It's going to cut costs of the healthcare system because we're going to kill the sick that we can't take care of, which we can't take care of now because of how bad the system is. So it's straight up a death cult coming out of Canada, and it's been put on blast to the point where they sort of, they're trying to downplay the extent to which they want to liberalize euthanasia, but it's state-sanctioned murder. And in 2 provinces, they've now basically said that you sort of have to opt out, or you cannot opt out of organ donations. I think it was called Avery's Law out of New Brunswick. And so what we are literally going to have is the state killing people in hospitals and harvesting their organs. And because they're going to be presumed to have opted into organ donating, and the state gets to decide when you're effectively dead for the purpose of harvesting your organs. And we've just seen the numbers expand like exponentially year over year.
It's so odd, this sort of obsequious sort of caving to centralized authority. It's the weirdest thing to me. I mean, haven't they seen enough now? Haven't we had enough examples? I mean, look, the Biden story is getting people's attention, right? They're like, oh my God, they were lying to us. I can't believe it. They were obfuscating and lying. Yeah, from day one about just about everything. We now have all the data on myocarditis coming out. They suppressed that. They attacked people who wanted to talk about it. Anything to do with Biden's mental status was attacked and just sidelines and maliciously. This is the part I don't like. You have Jake Tapper running around going, I guess I got it wrong. I mean, what are you going to do? No. Getting it wrong is one thing, but participating in the psyop of silencing alternative opinions, as you said a few minutes ago, that's the part that runs contrary to the basic principles of these countries and why we have countries like America and Canada.
Jake Tapper didn't get anything wrong. He was a pathological liar and a participant in the cover-up from the get-go. He's not going to convince me otherwise. Get out there. Oh, I didn't. Everybody knew, and if he didn't know, he's either exceptionally blind or he's in on it, and he's in on it. But what is amazing is that they lied to us from the beginning. They concealed all of the information. They suppressed actual information from Facebook at the time because they didn't want to create vaccine hesitancy. They denied the injuries. Remember, I mean, we lived through this. At first, it didn't cause myocarditis. Then it was 1 in 100,000. Then it was 1 in 20,000. Then it's 1 in 5,000. Then it's 1 in 5,000 per dose. And then they started admitting. I mean, I watched a bit of Dr. Peter McCullough during the hearings today, talking about how terrible it was. And they knew that it was terrible. They knew that they were mass producing an experimental jab.
The whole conceit.
Here we go.
Oh, here is, by the way, here's Tapper. Look at this.
Joe Biden, his advisors, and to a large degree, the entire Democratic Party bought into the argument that Donald Trump posed an existential threat to the United States. Joe Biden was the only one who could defeat him. And therefore, anything that went after Joe Biden would help Donald Trump. That argument, when you convince yourself that the enemy, if you're a Democrat, the enemy is Donald Trump. If you convince yourself that the enemy is an existential threat, you can justify almost anything.
Oh, not almost anything. You can justify anything, and that quote is my favorite one because I all the way back into the early part of the first Trump presidency, I kept saying people feel delusional to me. This feels like a delusional preoccupation, and then COVID hit, and I went, where did we become hysterical and delusional as a country? Whole world became hysterical and delusional. It really started with that. The Trump is Hitler propaganda that they implanted in people's brains. And if he is Hitler, then anything is justified in stopping Hitler.
You're going to know who the author is. It's a famous quote that they say, those who can convince us to believe absurdities can get us to commit atrocities. It was maybe Nietzsche. But he's right. I mean, you remember we were talking about mass formation psychosis during COVID. And they were saying, no, it's a conspiracy theory because behavioral psychologists have chimed in and said it's not a real thing. And people don't understand, a behavioral psychologist is someone who exercises or operates in the concept of mass formation psychosis. They've just called it a different thing. They call it behavior. But it started. Yes. I only noticed it starting in 2015 with Trump. And in retrospect now, you know Mark Robert, he planted the idea in my head that this is actually just one big extension of MK Ultra, mass formation psychosis level psychological manipulation. We've been going... And people don't seem to understand it. In Canada, bring it back up north. They literally admitted, the military, that COVID was a good time to test military propaganda on people. And they were running fake stories about wolves on the loose in Nova Scotia to see how people would react. It was a mass experimentation, psychological, physical.
What about the
COVID.
killer bees?
and then some people, it's the Mark Twain, like it's easier to fool some people than to convince them they've been fooled, because for parents right now to have to reconcile the fact that they might have injected their kids with this stuff and hurt their kids, to admit that is too hard. So they'll live with the lie. But yeah, it's Jake Tapper.
I don't know. Jake Tapper, what?
Is a participant.
By the way, people who complain about us talking over each other, we have a delay here.
Wait,
you end up talking over each other. That's the way it works.
Can I interrupt you guys? You haven't taken a breath in this entire show.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I have to interrupt you because Viva's feed is garbly gush.
Oh.
It's kind of blah, 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 blah. It sounds like it's underwater. So the Dr. Drew feed is good. So if everybody is over there and wants to switch over, but we're trying to get in touch with Viva's producer to talk to Caleb.
Viva is Viva's producer.
Yeah, I was literally, I couldn't get a break. You guys were talking so fast.
All right,
and I said the same
But it
thing.
was
I
good
said,
stuff.
do this.
Feed
Why
is
don't I take a commercial break? How about that? Can I do that,
so
Caleb?
Viva, call Caleb.
No, but we're gonna raid your feed and then I'm gonna end mine. So I don't know if you can hear me now, but we'll raid and then leave.
Perfect.
Okay. That we're doing right now?
Yeah.
Caleb, is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect. Rate us.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Caleb died.
All right, my friend. Talk to you soon. Rate and then whatever. And then we'll take a little break and we'll bring our next guest in, who is an advocate for Alberta
Caleb
as the
died.
51st state.
All right, my friend.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Take care.
Rate and then whatever. And then all kinds of. We tried, but it was a clever idea. But it wasn't. I thought it was pretty good, but I enjoyed it. Okay, be right back after this. The Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and that's why they're constantly innovating to deliver the products and services to help you be rationally ready. Be sure to have the medical kit for kids on hand, whether you're a parent or grandparent. It treats 20 childhood conditions, including nausea and vomiting, allergies, asthma, inflammatory illnesses, even bioterror, God forbid. Listen, croup, ear infections, lice, it's all available in the pediatric emergency kit. You can also order the kids kit with an EpiPen should your child be at risk of anaphylaxis. And those EpiPens are carefully sourced and well priced relative to other EpiPens in the market. All 7 kits, each customized for a different purpose, come with a telemedicine consultation and a guidebook. Skip the scramble to an urgent care waiting room full of sick people and expense, or a pharmacy where there's no guarantee they'll have what you need. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off any medical emergency kit, or the supplements for that matter. That again is drdrew.com/TWC. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it, I make Susan take it, my whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid, it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15.
That's brilliant. And thank you, Drew. Where's Dr. Drew? Where is he? Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew.
And before I bring in our next guest, Paley Valley's bone broth, extraordinary. I love the taste. On top of that, it's made from actual bones, grass-fed and finished cattle. It is not hide like many of these places, many of these bone broths, so-called. It's a source of collagen protein, which is essential for wellness and longevity. Here we go to dr.com/Paleo Valley to get 20% off when you subscribe, or 15% off your first order. Here is the vanilla flavor. It comes in several different flavors. I just had the chocolate before I came up here. I do bone broth on a daily basis. It's very low in calorie, high in nutrient, and helps with.
Producer Robin said it's helping her hair grow.
She did say that to me,
and
I
your
said,
hair looks good too.
And I said, if you want to lose weight, it's a great way to help with appetite suppression too, or appetite management. All right, our next guest is Peter Downing. He is the primary founder of the movement Wexit America Fund, high-profile leader of the Alberta 51st State Movement. He's a former police officer, Army reservist. He used public billboards 2020, 2019 to launch the Wexit Canadian Separatist Movement, so-called, and the Alberta USA Movement. Peter, welcome to the program. There it is. Peter, we appreciate you being here, and I am fascinated by the movement.
Hey, thanks for having me, Drew.
Pleasure. So one of the things that kind of bothers me is this continued talk about Canada not being for sale. And the reality is the process of becoming a state, a territory, and then a state has nothing to do with exchange of funds. Where in the world did anybody get the idea that this is a purchase? It's not the Louisiana Purchase. It's a formation of a state.
Yeah, I think it was good PR pick to get in the minds of low information voters who have a personal antipathy towards President Trump.
And so how did you get involved in all this, and how realistic is it? And, somebody was saying, well, California keeps talking about seceding and Alberta's talking about coming in. I thought, God, we would get a much better deal. Let's let California go and bring Alberta in. That sounds like not even an even exchange. It sounds like we win with that one.
Yeah, I started back in 2019, and it was, I've been involved in small c conservative politics since about 2015. Pro-life, pro-family type movements, those sorts of things. And then I got involved in the electoral politics a little bit more with, our version of the Republican, and I say version in quotes, of the Republican Party, the conservative parties in Canada, both at the provincial and the federal levels. I spent 12 years in federal public service. So I'd always realized that we weren't getting the results that we were paying for in terms of the public delivery of law enforcement, those types of things. And I always questioned why. So it was sort of one track social, one track in terms of public services. And it was when I realized, and it was just explained to me, you just looked at an electoral map, that Eastern Canada, two cities, Toronto and Montreal in particular, had more votes in the House of Commons, more seats in the House of Commons. We're in a Westminster parliamentary system than all of Alberta combined. And that was right at the time where we were experiencing massive job losses from Trudeau net zero policies. Now we have Mark Carney, who's the kingpin of the net zero movement. But a lot of people out of work, and the question was why? Why is this happening? And it's really the systems part that allows this to happen, to have Alberta alienated and not to be able to have any real representation at the national level. So I had always said to myself, if you have a problem with something, put it on a billboard. I sold a broke down van I had for scrap metal, and that paid for my first billboard. And I asked the question, should Alberta ditch Canada? And at the time, it was the thing that everybody was talking about on Twitter. It was the thing that everybody was speaking about on Facebook. In the Canadian personality thing, I don't think it's that we're polite. I think that it's we're seeking broad consensus that we're not alone, that we're not the only ones thinking these things. And so when it was put on a billboard for public display for everybody to see, it sort of popped that psychological, that bubble where now it becomes the water that we swim in. And started there, took it to Saskatchewan because folks in the neighboring province, which is kind of like, which is just on the border of, it's actually borders Montana as well. And it's very similar to North Dakota. It's a farming province. And we're helping out the folks there. Did a billboard, should Saskatchewan leave Canada? And then as the year went on, I recognized that, this is only affecting the conservative side of the spectrum because they need Western Canada to be able to form government. But the Liberal Party, the Justin Trudeau Party, the Mark Carney Party didn't. Their power base is in Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec. So then I asked the question in 2020, should Alberta join the USA? And that was the lead up to the 2020 US federal election, obviously. I happen to be and always have been a major supporter and admirer of President Trump for his business achievements, his political achievements. I've been following him since he was first on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the late 80s, early 90s when I was a little guy. So I put that up on a billboard, and I put one right by the Alberta legislature, and I put one right by the federal parliament in Ottawa, and that got quite a big reaction. So that started to get it into the mindset, that Wexit movement, that Alberta USA Foundation kind of got into the minds and formed a little bit of a political cultural base here in Alberta. The Joe Biden election and the COVID-19 got in the way of further progress, further natural progress on that. But COVID eventually went away, and President Trump got reelected. And then in November, that dinner in Mar-a-Lago with Trudeau, he said that Canada should become the 51st state. Actually, what he technically said is it should be split into two states, a conservative state and a liberal state. And folks, from 2020 reached back out to me, and we whipped up the America Fund project. And we took our premier, which is our version of our governor in Alberta, Danielle Smith, her trip down to Mar-a-Lago, where she posed with President Trump and Kevin O'Leary, put that right on a big, beautiful billboard. And it was right at the time when the media here and the political class here was saying, oh, it's just a joke. He's teasing. He's making fun of Trudeau. Well, I recognized that the narrative had to be taken away from the politicians and the pundits, and put up the billboard and said, yeah, actually, we want this. Because they say Canada's not for sale, we have to protect our sovereignty. Well, it's the politicians who want to protect their own sovereignty. It's the political class.
Their power.
Yeah, for me,
their source of power.
My sovereignty would come from a First Amendment, a Second Amendment, and proper taxation with representation.
So do you think that Trump coming up with sort of what, I mean, he was, I'm sure, bringing up Canada as a 51st or 52nd state in a teasing manner, but his teasing usually has some sort of intent behind it. I mean, he's been thinking about stuff before he starts teasing, it seems to me. And I wonder, did he hear about your movement beforehand, or is this just something in the vapors? How did he come up with that all of a sudden? Because that's down here, we were all like, Greenland, Canada, where'd this come from? It seems to have come out of nowhere, but I'm sure it didn't.
Yeah, I don't think it did. The geopolitics from, I would even go back further to 2016, but the Arctic is almost the new Cold War. Taking control of the Northwest Passage. You see Panama, the Panama Canal down the south. So Canada has no military, no ability to defend itself in the Arctic, and has been subverted by the Chinese Communist Party for quite some time. We say Canada's not for sale. Actually, our political class sold it off in 2012 with something called the FIPA, the Foreign Investment Protection Act. It was actually the Conservative government who signed that with China, and that was kind of the entryway for China to start snapping up Canadian assets and those kinds of things where Canadian companies sometimes can't get offshore oil permits, but Chinese companies can. So things like that, taking up the resources, because China doesn't produce its own energy. Canada obviously does. But no, I think you guys in the States, the Trump administration has been looking at it for quite some time. It was a very recent highlight. Being on your show was a highlight for me. We were retruthed. Our New York Post interview was retruthed on Truth Social by President Trump for Canadians who were over the moon and joined the 51st state to become the 51st state.
When was that?
That was on March 15th. March 15th. We've actually on the America Fund website, if you go on the media, you can scroll down and it's featured. You'll find it.
And so what's going on in terms of this picking up steam? How do you tell whether if this is part of a wave of support or who's into this, or where does it stand? If I'm just an average Albertan, do I hear about this? Do I have a feeling about it? Do I support it? What's going on the ground?
A couple of things. I work in my day job. I work in upstream oil and gas drilling operations. One of the support services on the rigs in northern Alberta. I can tell you, not scientifically, but I can tell you anecdotally. When and I've been working in this industry for 3 years. Over 85% of the guys, regular blue collar guys, they already feel that Alberta would be better off separate from Canada. And just about everybody, I only think I ever met 2 guys in 3 years who were, strongly opposed to or closed off, not open to joining the United States. We put in the work. We typically work 75, 80-hour weeks. And then, I'm just looking at my time entries from the past. So we look at that. We put in that time. We work in minus 40 to plus 40 weather. That would be minus 40 to, I think, plus 104 Fahrenheit. I had to do the calculation. I think I'm right with that. It's something like 144 Fahrenheit swing. But that is what we work, because it gets really cold and it gets really hot here as well. We put in that work. It's long, hard, painful. We're away from family. You can throw in all the hardships you can think about. And then we work and we make that money. But then when we circle our taxes paid, each paycheck is, where does that go? We have this thing in Canada called an equalization program, and since it started, I think, in the 1950s, Alberta hasn't seen $1 back. It's other things that we have here, things like the Prime Minister of Canada gets to appoint our senators. So it'd almost be something like, imagine Donald Trump appoints Ted Cruz to be the senator for California. Or if Hillary Clinton won, she could put Elizabeth Warren as the senator of Texas. But we actually have that here in Alberta or in Canada. When it comes to the political narrative out here, and if you type in Alberta separation, and you can see who's attacking it. And it's the Canadian political class that's absolutely attacking it, the same way they attack President Trump for his ambush of the South African president, things like that. It's almost good is evil and evil is good. But in terms of why they're not writing it off as a joke, one of the I wouldn't say spin-offs, but the things that naturally originate, because it isn't like 1775 where we had an industrial, you guys had industrialists who sought independence from Britain. They were Englishmen. We don't have the oil and gas industry coming up, and it's not the oil and gas industry that's running it. It's really average working class and professional Albertans. We have something here called the Alberta Prosperity Project. My friend Dennis Maudry, who was one of the first folks that got into the Wexit movement with me, he successfully launched the Alberta Prosperity Project. They're the ones out there. You might have seen a lawyer, Jeff Rath, who said he was going down to the States to the White House or to Washington to talk about statehood, Alberta becoming the 51st state. So it's that group. And what they've done is they've collected, I think they're at about 500,000 signatures, pledges, for a referendum. The Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, she's lowered the threshold for a citizen-initiated referendum, where we could have it on the ballot maybe by the end of this year, even next year, to have a referendum on separation from Canada. So this is what's being attacked right now.
So I want to interrupt you, and I want to understand that process. For instance, like in this country, the way the states are aligned, the way Abraham Lincoln used to always phrase it is it's an alignment. It's a contract amongst equals. Therefore, one side does not have the capacity to just step out of that contract, like any contract. I don't like this anymore. I'm not going to pay my bill, whatever. But this, he used to always say, Abraham Lincoln, he would say, the Confederate States, so-called. He goes, these were states in insurrection. They were not states seceding, because secession doesn't exist. Do you have a mechanism for a secession in Canada? And that's 2 questions. If you have some sort of mechanism, then what's the mechanism for statehood?
So we do have that mechanism. In 1980, I believe in 1994 was the most recent Quebec separation referendum. There was no legal process in place. It would have been, I guess, for lack of a better term, a wildcat referendum. The Canadian military was, if they had voted yes, they were prepared to go in and lock them down. They voted no by a very slim margin. And in the aftermath of that followed, there was something called the Clarity Act, which Parliament passed, which was we critique it as a very overly onerous, very high hurdles, almost impossible hurdles to achieve separation for a province that wants to separate from Canada. But then after that, which was more important, there was something, the Supreme Court's reference case on that. So the Supreme Court of Canada weighed in, and they were able to outline, it was referred to, and they were able to more clearly delineate the process by which separation would have to happen. So the first main hurdle is a very clear question, a clear question. Do you want to leave Canada? And the Alberta Prosperity Project has come out and said, they've said, do you want to leave Canada to become Alberta to leave Canada to become its own country? So here we have a very clear question that they're collecting the signatures for right now. The second part would be if a clear majority, so 50% plus one, was achieved in that referendum, there has to be that clear majority. And the third part would be negotiations between the seceding province and then the rest of Canada or the federal parliament. It would have to be ratified by the federal parliament, a bunch of provinces. So yeah, and not politically likely. I've always looked at it from the perspective of, well, it wasn't like you guys in the States jump through the English High Court to get your now you had war. It was different. The difference this time, though, why it's even different from Wexit from 2019 and 2020 is President Trump. President Trump has come out and said he wants Canada to be the 51st state, split into two states probably. And it starts with Alberta. I think it was a month ago or so, there was an interview in the Oval Office with Brian, I can't remember, is Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, I think, who put it to President Trump, said he had been speaking with officials in Canada, and there's a pathway to separation. It starts in Alberta first, Saskatchewan second, and British Columbia third. And President Trump obviously responded yes, and here's why it's good for a lot of different reasons. So the political unfairness that we would expect from Canada, if there is a clear question, there's a clear question that seems to be out there right now. If there is a clear majority, 50% plus one, which we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of the bad stuff that the federal government can do or is expected to do to Alberta. It could be a bottoming out of the price of oil. It could be 300% export tariffs on our oil and gas to you guys in the States, which they seem to rabidly want in Eastern Canada to be able to end this trade war. That political unfairness that we would expect, we expect that we will get the 50% plus one because of what we expect Canada to do to Alberta. But now that we have President Trump and the U.S. administration, and it isn't just President Trump, Secretary Rubio, others have been saying the same thing, that we do have a bigger, badder kid on the block in our corner this time.
So very interesting. And what sounds like teasing, maybe a joke, it sounds like Alberta, and particularly your organization, is taking it very seriously, and that there is a road to becoming to statehood, quite literally. And again, not to be bought, not to be purchased, not to be overtaken like some sort of invasion. It's you, the citizens of Alberta, electing to pull out of the union with Quebec, the other Canadian provinces, and to then pursue the path to statehood. Very interesting. How do we keep up with you? Where do we go? What sort of milestones should we look for as you move along here?
Yeah, you can follow us on X at Real America Fund. If you go on the website there are social media links. We try to broaden out. We try not to centralize the movement, because the movement itself is, I might be a recognized leader, or maybe one of the more prominent ones, especially on the 51st state side of things. But it is so grassroots. And I think that you're going to hear a lot more about this, both in Canada and the USA, because there's also another major objective, which is keeping our resources. We've got the third or fourth largest oil reserves in the world out of the hands of the Communist Chinese Party and their war machine. They can't have access to this. And so we have a common interest and a common objective.
Yeah, I was thinking about how much oil drilling goes on in North Dakota, and we just go straight up from there into your province, and that is a massive amount of oil and gas. All right, my friend. Well, good, interesting. I'm fascinated. Real America Fund is where you go on X, and we'll watch with great interest as you it's just a kind of a historically interesting movement. So congratulations and Godspeed.
Thank you, Drew. Really appreciate it.
All right, Peter Downey, everybody. Thank you. The founder of Wexit America Fund, Real America Fund. You can follow them on X. And let me look at what you guys are doing on the restream. Again, my computer's over here now. I apologize for looking away from the camera. You guys, thank you. Oh, there's some Albertans on the thread here. I see you. They are echoing what he says in terms of their desire to be the 51st state. It's so interesting. I mean, where that came out of nowhere, it seems like, from this part of the country. Caleb, maybe do you want to put on the screen upcoming guest here? We are at Thursday now, so next guest will be Tuesday. We're remaining at 2:00. We will be with Clayton Baker, writing a really good book. Li Meng Yan, we're going to get her back in here to talk about the source of the virus.
It's going to be a debate between
What's
Dr.
that?
Li Meng Yan. It's going to be a debate between Dr. Li Meng Yan and Dr. Clayton Baker on that day.
Really?
That's what Emily says, yeah.
I'm not sure they're going to debate much. I think the debate will be about whether it was an intentional release, that if Li Meng Yan still thinks it was an intentional viral release. But Clayton Baker is very up on the excesses of COVID, and he understands the Chinese Communist Party's input into all of this. Naomi Wolf, Amy Alcon, Dr. Simone Gold, Anuska DeJourjou, Emily Hagan comes in to give us a report about all things Diddy. Mark Chankisi, he's a famous, we've had him here a couple of times, a cognitive psychologist and physicist. Salty Cracker makes another command performance here, and Vivek Meniki, she has a great new study out. Again, she's one that alerted us to the fact that certain vats of the vaccine was more likely to have adverse events than other vats, so to speak. We're looking at I'm looking at Emily's idea about the debate here, the source of the virus. But my understanding is, Emily, that I know Li Meng Yan believes it was an intentional, maybe two intentional releases by the Chinese Communist Party or the People's Liberation Army. But I'm not sure he is far off of that. So I don't know what they're going to be debating about, but I'm very interested nonetheless. All right, everybody. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate our guest. I hope you enjoyed our attempt at simulcasting of Viva Frei. I suggest, Caleb, I think we should try it again. I think it was a good effort. Yeah. And we know what, in my end, it was great. It wasn't what was going out, though, I guess.
Yeah, no. So on our channels, it was all great, but I think there was some sort of a crossover where it was coming in from our audio, but also probably Viva's mic at the same time. And when you cross audio channels like that, it makes everyone sound. They were saying they were very entertained though on his side. Viva's fans thought it was the best. They thought, "Oh, you sound like a chipmunk right now. Keep this episode."
I thank you, Viva's audience, our new friends. Let me just look around here.
Yeah, and if you're watching us on Rumble, just remember, follow Drew's channel on Rumble. We do shows 3 to 4 days a week. We have really great guests all the time, and we have a lot of great ones coming up. So be sure to follow Drew.
We've really got a lot of stuff going on here. I'm very proud of this show and what we're doing. And I've learned a lot talking to the people. I look forward to it every time we're having a show. And Caleb does a great job producing it. Susan does a great job of working on this. Emily Barsh does an extraordinary job of booking it and sort of setting up the conversation. So if you have suggestions, contact drdrew.com. We've always asked for feedback there if you guys want to bring stuff up. I can go over again at some point my prostate cancer. The prostate cancer thing is getting more complicated as they're sort of slowly releasing records, and you have to start to wonder: we're getting into the territory of stupid or liar? This is Adam Carolla's thing: stupid or liar. That's it. So bad medicine or obfuscating the reports, one or the other. And if you want to know what the evidence is that he got bad care, look at the outcome. He ends up with metastatic disease. That really doesn't have to happen these days. It can happen, but the President of the United States shouldn't be getting metastatic prostate cancer. And if indeed they stopped screening him in 2014, as they allege, I would call that poor judgment. And also not keeping up on currently available data and wisdom on the topic of PSA screening. That's an old controversy that's largely been settled in favor of yearly screening. So everybody, please get your PSA every year. Please, if you have a first-degree relative, father, grandfather, brother with prostate cancer, start at age 40. All right, Caleb, anything else before I wrap it all up?
Something that you should mention, because this is something that I did not know all the way till now, is that you don't have to have your doctor stick your finger up your butt to get a prostate exam. I did not know there was a blood test.
Caleb was very intrigued by this whole thing. So the digital rectal exam we used to do with the PSA, so it helps us sort of feel the surface of the prostate, so we could feel things like the nodules that they claimed they found, and magically metastatic disease. And if they were still doing digital rectal exams on poor Joe Biden, again, suboptimal healthcare. So stupid or liar. That's what we got going here. Either they're not telling us what they did, or they were giving him suboptimal healthcare. Either are possible. I don't know. I didn't take care of him. I do know a lot about prostate cancer, so I am the person to be talking about it. I'm both a patient, I'm a treating physician, and I'm involved in research on prostate cancer. So I am definitely somebody to be discussing this topic. So I'm happy to address it as it moves along here. But more than anything else, it is just a reminder of how they have obfuscated and lied. And I don't know if you saw Senator Ron Johnson yesterday talking about and Peter McCullough putting out the material, and James Thorpe about the vaccines and myocarditis and the extraordinary efforts to suppress that information. And I'm going to predict something right now, that the myocarditis story was sort of leaking out. If you remember, the Israelis reported it, then Japan reported it, and then there was a VAERS report, and then I'm blanking on the kid's name that dropped dead on the football field. Can you help me with that, Caleb?
Damar
Hamlin drops dead, and that is where all talk stopped. All stopped immediately. He had commotion cordis. That's it. And let's never forget that when he was asked about it, he went, "I'm not going to talk about it. I was told not to talk about it." I bet he was, and I'd love to hear him talk about it now, because that they did not recommend that people avoid physical activity after that vaccine, even if they had myocarditis, and that could have killed a lot of people. And there's blood on their hands on that one, if that's indeed what happened. All right, quickly, I'm going to go look back at the chats. I appreciate it. Let's all. I'd love to have Alberta as the 51st state. Wouldn't that be interesting? It seems like a beautiful country. Isn't that where the Glacier National Park, the Canadian part of Glacier is? You go to Montana and then Alberta. So we'll put those parts of Glacier together.
All right, everybody, in the comments that if they're saying if we get Alberta, then we could drive straight from the United States up to Alaska without passing through Canada. I think geographically, if I know my geography.
I don't know. Don't you have to go? I think that might be true, right?
It might be true.
Because British Columbia doesn't go all the way up, or does it?
I'll have to fact check that. But they seemed excited about that possibility if you just drive straight up and you stay in America the whole way. It's America.
Yep. America. It'll be very interesting if something like that were to happen. It sort of changes the whole world order. It's kind of wild. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you Tuesday at 2:00. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.